Aloha, Algebra 2 students. Let's get ready for that Unit 4 test. So let's find the inverse of the function f of x equals 4x plus 7. So we start by rewriting the function with y instead of f of x. So y equals 4x plus 7. Now to actually make it inverse, we switch the inputs for the outputs. So we're going to change the variables and then solve for y. So the y, I'm going to make that become x, and the x, I'm going to make that become y. That's all we change at that point. We just switch the output becomes the input, input becomes the output. Now we're going to solve for y to get the inverse function. I need to subtract 7 from both sides of the equal sign. I get x minus 7 equals 4y. Now I need to divide both sides by 4, and I get y equals x minus 7 over 4. Now I need to state the inverse of f of x using inverse notation. And inverse notation looks like this. F inverse, the little negative 1 power means f inverse of x equals x minus 7 over 4. So for number 2, we're going to graph the inverse function of the function that's shown here. Now you may recall that the graph of an inverse is reflection across the line y equals x. So what we want to do is we want to pick some points on the original graph and reflect them across the line y equals x. So here's a point, negative 1, 1, and when I reflect that across, it's negative 1, 1. What about this point here? This point is negative 2, negative 4. If I reflect that across, it's going to change and become negative 4, negative 2. So there's negative 4, negative 2. So what's another point? How about this point right here, 1, negative 1. If I switch the input and output, it would be negative 1, 1. So negative 1, 1 is right here. Negative 1, 1. And how about this point? This is 2, negative 4. And if I switch the inputs and outputs, that will become negative 4, 2. Negative 4, 2. So this point, the point 0, 0, if I switch the inputs and outputs, that's still going to be 0, 0. So now I think I'm ready to graph my inverse. So now, is the inverse a function? Well, the vertical line test is what tells us if it's a function. And if you look right here, we've got one vertical line that's intersecting the graph twice. That means I have one single x value that is being mapped to two different y values. So that's not a function. It fails the vertical line test, and that indicates that a single x value is mapped to more than one y value. Not cool. Suppose f of x is x squared. So this is x squared. And g of x is negative 1/2 times the quantity x plus 4 squared plus 3. On the same grid, draw the graph of g of x. Well, the plus 4 here and the plus 3 here, those are going to be shifts. A plus 4 really means minus negative 4. So that means to the left 4 units. So if I'm thinking about the vertex was here, it's going to go to the left 4 units. And then the plus 3 says up 3 units. So up 1, 2, 3 units. So that's going to be my new vertex. Negative 4, 3. And now my parabola, the negative sign, is going to make it flip downwards. And the 1/2 is going to make it half as tall. It's going to be compressed vertically. So I can also plug in some x values to find some exact points to graph. If I plug in, now I can think about this parabola being half as tall. So when I went over 1 on this parabola, I went up 1. So when I go over 1 on this parabola, I'm going to go down a half. I'm going to go down half as far. So if I go to the left one, I'm going to go down half. Here, if I go over 2, I go up 1, 2, 3, 4. So half of that is 2. So if I go over 2 here, I'm going to go down 2. If I go over 2 here, I'm going to go down 2. And on the original one, if I went over 3, I went up 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is up off the graph, so I'm not really going to worry about that. But what I will do is I will graph through those points that I have. And we can label those points. -2, 1. -2, 1. You should always label your points on a test. This is -6, 1. -5, 2.5. So -5, 2.5. And then this is -3, 2.5. So then describe how the graph of g of x relates to the graph of f of x. Well, if you take f of x, flip it across the x-axis, then vertically compress it by a factor of 1/2, then shift it 4 units to the left and 3 units up, boom, you got g of x. So the difference between f of x and g of x. The only difference here is that g of x has a 5 multiplied by the x squared term. And that is a vertical stretch. When you multiply a number times the x, that is a vertical stretch. So the difference between f of x and g of x here is that I have a 2 subtracted from the end. That means my whole graph goes down 2. So that is called a vertical shift, down 2 units. Here, I've added 2 to just the x term, to the x part. So that means I'm actually subtracting a -2, so that's 2 to the left. It's a horizontal shift, 2 units left. And here I'm multiplying the x squared term by a -1/3. So that's going to flip it. The negative part flips it across the x-axis, and then the 1/3 is a vertical compression by a factor of 1/3. So this graph resembles y equals x squared, but it has been flipped over the axis, the x-axis, compressed vertically by a factor of 1/3, shift up 1 unit, and right 2 units. So write the equation. Well, we know that when it's flipped over, it's a negative. The compression factor vertically is 1/3. So then we're going to have the x in here squared. But we do have a horizontal shift. It's to the right 2 units. So that's going to be -2. And then we're shifting up 1 unit, so that's +1. A little neater. So the negative sign being multiplied by the x squared term flips the parabola over the x-axis. Multiplying the x squared term by 1/3 compresses it vertically. Subtracting 2 from the x moves you 2 to the right. and adding 1 to the end shifts you up 1. So the graph of f of x is shown here. Suppose that g of x has the same shape but is shifted up 3 units and left 5 units. So basically, all I have to do is take each point and move it up 3 and then left 5. So this is going to be sort of the middle. If I move this point up 3 to the left 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's right there. This point here was over 1 and up 1 from the center point, so over 1 and up 1. Now from this point up here, if I go over 1, I go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-ish. So just to get an idea, I'm going to go over 1 and then down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about there. Now I'm 2 across to get to the middle, so I can go 2 across again and have another point out there. And now I just try to draw the same shape that we see here in gray. Now we see that over here in red, and that's pretty awesome. So I hope you had a good time watching this video, and may the force be with you when you take the test. See you soon.